Let's get back home. The news is out. The Central Bank of Nigeria has thrown the ball of economic development into the court of the fiscal authorities while sticking to its own core mandate of moderating prices and discovery of exchange rate. That was the message that the monetary policy sent today by raising policy rate to 27.25%, as well as jacking up the cash reserve ratio for commercial banks to a record 50%. Let's take excerpts from Olayemi Kadoso at this post-MPC briefing. That was held a few hours ago. Shall we?
In as much as the strategy of the central bank is to unlock as many diversified sources as possible into the foreign exchange area, it is our strategy. But it is not enough. And it can never take the place of fundamentals. It can never. We may like to think it can, we may like to dream it can, but it can't. Until the fundamentals are fixed and in place, you will continue to suboptimize. Oil production has got to be ramped up to the level that will carry the economy. And I think we are all ongoing witnesses to the efforts that are being made in that sector. It has to happen. Non-oil exports, and I spoke about the sad situation that we as Nigerians face today, whereby we are a monolithic economy. As long as we are a monolithic economy, the constraints to having the strong exchange rate that we also desire will continue to be hampered. We need to diversify our economy. We need to. There's so much that a central bank can do. Without the fundamentals in the right position, we will continue to suboptimize. Again, as Nigerians, we must look for ways for import substitution. It cannot all be about import, import, import. And our taste for foreign goods, also, we must be able to calibrate them accordingly. So these are all things that essentially will determine where we settle with respect to our foreign exchange rates. And as I said, we may want to wish it away, but it's not going to go anywhere. The central bank is determined to play its part in ensuring that the markets operate efficiently, and those who gain the market, if we get them, they pay the price. But that will not substitute for fundamentals. It's not going to. It will help along the way. It will make the road of travel easier, but ultimately it's the fundamentals. So from our perspective, I think we're doing everything possible to ensure that there's sufficient cash in the system. That's that side of it. That there's no excuse for not having sufficient cash in the system. Now it goes to the deployment of that cash. It goes to the deployment of that cash. And quite frankly, we're working very, very closely. We're engaging with all the deposit money banks to ensure that they are putting these things through their ATMs, effectively dispensing cash to those that are in need. And whether they are in need or not, that's the function of the deposit money banks. That at all points in time, there should be sufficient cash in their system that nobody should go there without being able to withdraw. We ourselves have got in place a monitoring system. We have devised a monitoring system a spot checking system whereby we will go to the banks and just ensure that these things are done in a way and manner in which they are meant to be done. And if they are not, again, there'll be sanctions. But I believe that the stage we are in now, everybody realizes that the various stakeholders must play their part in ensuring that cash gets to the desired places that we intend them to be. Let me say in no uncertain terms that from my perspective, the Dangote refinery portends good things for the Nigerian economy. It portends good things for the Nigerian economy. Right now, imported products contributes between 10 and 15% of our imports. And to the extent that we're able to do away with that, I think that's a very, very, very good thing. It's a very positive thing. So I think there's cause for us to look with optimism that 10 to 15% of what the pressure that we are getting will abate over a period of time. And of course, additionally, as production ramps up and we get to 2 million barrels and over, and the export side begins to kick in and foreign exchange starts to come in, that also will further support the Naira and of course our efforts at managing the foreign exchange rate.
All right, let's hit the ground running with an analysis of the surprising rate hike today by Nigeria's central bank as the regulator kicked the can down the road and into the courtyards of the government, calling for a change in the fundamentals of the economy. Welcome, my guest, Nnamdi Nwizu, an investment market professional and a co-managing partner at Commercial Partners Group of financial service providers. Great having you in the conversation room this evening.
Great to be here.
Great. A shot in the blue. I was hoping for a hold. Was I alone?
You weren't. Honestly, I think most people expected a hold, or even if anything at all, maybe 25 basis points max. But most people expected that there'll be a hold.
There'll be a hold.
Yeah.
And this was straight out of the poll. Was that in line with expectations? Somehow, somewhat, that there could be a 50 basis point hikes when major central banks around the world, perhaps with the exception of a few, are cutting rates.
I mean, I think it goes beyond even the rate hike. I think more about the increase in,
in CRR.
In CRR, yes. I think that even has a much larger impact than even the 50 basis point hike at this point in time. I mean, most of us had expected that, we've seen inflation start to trend down a little bit. And looking at what has happened in the past, typically there's a transition or transmission period, right? It takes a while between when you raise rates and when you start to see the effects in the market. So expectation had been that, look, we've gone quite some way. Market has been pretty tight for quite a while. I mean, negative liquidity in the markets seems to be the regular play right now. And most people expected that they'll most probably just either hold or just do a tiny little, hike in rates and just leave it there, basically signaling we're comfortable where we are and want to watch.
Maybe 25 basis points to the upside, not a 50.
25 basis points, not a 50. Definitely not a 50.
Definitely not a 50.
Yeah. But definitely not a 500 basis points.
Yes, on CRR.
Yeah.
We'll get to the CRR in just a second. But again, when you look at the metrics, as it were, in which the central bank governor, that press briefing kept harping on excess liquidity, volatility of money, velocity, money supply, going at about 12.6% when GDP is doing just an average around a flattish 1-2%.
Yeah.
Was that a very source of concern? How much Naira we have chasing virtually nothing or unproductive activities in the economy of 200 million people?
I mean, definitely a worry. Definitely worried to see the huge growth in money supply. I mean, he traced it back to 2005 or 2015
yes.
and showed how it had grown exponentially. So definitely was a concern. But I mean, question is, does raising rates at this point in time address your major concern? Is your concern really liquidity, or is it now cost push inflation? Because, I mean, that seems to what we're seeing more and more now. You have FX, which seems to be, transmitting into imported inflation. You have cost of borrowing, cost of production for companies hitting the roof because they're all borrowing at much higher levels. I mean, whoever thought that Dangote, for instance, one day will borrowing funds at, 20%, 22, 23, 24% levels. I mean, so it's pretty...
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. So, yes, you want to focus on money supply and try and reduce money in the system, but I'm not sure that is what is actually driving inflation. You had the recent increase in fuel prices.
Yes.
This won't counter it. This is not going to stop costs of transportation going up and cost of goods and services. It's not going to stop the fact that people are going to want wage increases, to counter or to, make up for the increase in transport costs and all of that.
Exactly. So it's a very tight rope right now. Do you see the central bank or the MPC, therefore, the team, kicking the can down the road, telling the fiscal authorities, you've got to help us? The central bank governor says, look, there's so much that the central bank can do. Is that a message? Is that a signaling to the fiscal authorities?
Yeah, I mean, even the previous central bank governor used to say that. I mean, they always used to sing that at every...
Almost every
MPC meeting. The truth about it, and his statement says it all, there's so much central bank can do, and which also points to the fact that monetary policy has its limits, right? There's only so much you can achieve with monetary policy. At a point in time, the ball shifts to the fiscal side of things, right? I mean, Naira at 50% means that if you bring $1 to the bank today, central bank is going to take 50 kobo out of that and leave the bank with only
and sterilize 50. It in the manner of
speaking. Yeah, sterilize it. So, I mean, even at 45, taking 45 kobo out of every $1 was already tight enough, right? So,
and that goes into the credit market.
So, what happens with, they talk about FAC and how you can manage that liquidity that comes from FAC.
How do we manage that?
Now
we're just sharing this helicopter money. I'm sure during the President Buhari's regime, he was also sharing so much money from the Paris Club refund. And that went into hundreds of, I think there been about 2-3 rounds of that went to all these 36 states of the Federation. Now we're sharing so much money from the full subsidy removal and FAC allocation. Where do all this money go?
Well, supposedly goes to governments to pay salaries and run their states. But the truth about it is, even with all of that, you've had increase in minimum wage. So a lot of the states are going to tell you they're going to struggle to pay salaries, right? Because in as much as you have an increase in FAC, at the same time, their expenses have also jumped. Some states really, what they really do with FAC is just to pay salaries. And that's almost all. Hardly see any infrastructure work done from their allocation, right? So, first of all, raising rates, so raising CRR doesn't necessarily address the FAC issue. What tends to happen is a lot of states even borrow ahead of FAC coming. So some states are in OD before FAC even hits the system, and the FAC basically just kneels off the account, and then you have to start the whole process all over again.
Just go like a musical chair. Just keep going round.
Yes.
And round.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've seen some radical suggestions in the past. Some have been, why don't you issue FAC in dollars rather than Naira, so that you don't have Naira liquidity in the system. Yes. And when the governors want Naira, they can sell dollars and get Naira. So you don't have Naira constantly hitting the system every month. Radical, can it work? I mean, they talked about the fact that FX rate moves up every time you have FAC allocation. So that says to you that they believe that some of that money goes into FX, right? So that means even if you issue them dollars, right? A lot of that money might disappear. At least that's what I get from what they said today. So, but that could be a solution, right? Where you get to actually not inflow Naira continuously into the system every month. Because with the increase in exchange rates, we've seen the FAC figures jump up. I mean, we've seen an increase of about 40-50% in the monthly FAC allocation that comes in. But once again, I think we're more in a cost push inflation period than demand pull. That's what I see. Going to different places, is exchange rate they talk about. So focus should be, first of all, how can we bring the exchange rate down? And I'm not sure interest rates are going to help anymore. I think it's more about the fiscal side, like he mentioned, and how we can get crude oil production up, or start to look for other means of getting dollar inflows into the economy to help support the currency. But I mean, we've seen OMO issued at 21, 22%, effective yield about 28, and yet the people are not coming in anymore, at least not like we'd expect for those kind of rates. So you want to push it to 40%? Then let's not forget that when they're going out, they need to take their dollars out. So that still puts pressure on your currency.
Exactly.
So it's only short-lived, relief from pressure.
Very small window.
Yeah, so once they start going out, all that pressure starts again.
Then I was seeing a raft of interest rate cuts by the US and a few others. China jumped into the fray. Yesterday to this morning, roughly $200 billion is what China is releasing into the markets and whatever to stimulate the real estate market, mortgage, buy into the stocks and what have you, just to rev things up. So all that, the IMF says, is going to be positive for emerging and developing economies when it comes to foreign currency. So we've just done 50 basis points hike. Where does that leave our currency inflows moving into the rest of the year?
I mean, definitely it does help because, first of all, we know what the popular carry trade, the cheaper the cost of funds, the easier it is for them to borrow in dollars and come and invest in Naira, right?
Exactly.
So the lower the rate, the better it is for other currencies. So technically, as the dollar rate goes lower, reduces, then you definitely have you have the currency stand to weaken, and other currencies will strengthen, and not just emerging markets, but generally across the world, right? So the Bank of England has kept their rates steady. Yeah.
ECB.
As the Fed, ECB. So as
ECB did a cut.
ECB did a cut. Bank of Japan held steady. So with that happening, naturally their currency should strengthen a little bit against the dollar. And the same thing with emerging markets.
So you're not surprised that the dollar index down today is 0.26%, and the Naira down roughly 6%, 1,658 to the dollar at NFX.
Our own issue is a bit different, right? So sometimes people ask if it's spiritual, they don't understand again. But ideally, with that, and then with rates being high, we should see the dollar strengthen. But ours has gone to more of a supply issue than just interest rates. I mean, it goes way beyond that. We need to improve supply, or like Central Bank Governor mentioned, talk about import substitution. What can we manufacture locally to reduce, the cost, the amount of money we spend importing goods?
So what will the CRR at 50% do to the credit market? Give it to me.
Yeah, definitely tighten it. You're going to see a lot more liquidity go out once again from the banks. With the increase in MPR, you're going to have the banks raise rates. Naturally expect them to start seeing a raft of letters going out to other clients, and then to add the fact that they've also increased CRR, which means they're going to have less liquidity to even give out again. So if the banks have to go to the central bank window because the central bank has debited them for CRR, and they're going to go and take funds at
the SDR,
or
SLR, yes.
Yeah, so you're going to see rates at most probably 30-something% borrowing from central bank. Yeah, they're going to have to pass that on to their clients. So
to you and I.
To you and I, more the corporates than you and I, because the average man on the streets in Nigeria doesn't really borrow from the banks. Credit system doesn't really flow through. So, which is another issue as you raise, because in developed countries, when you raise rates, it reduces liquidity in the credit market. So people who would typically go and borrow, individuals, don't go to borrow as much. It becomes more expensive for them. But in Nigeria, people buy homes with cash. And then you pay up front for the house. You pay your rent up front straight away, 2 years rent.
So you get the South African Reserve Bank lower rate, 25 basis points. The repo went to 8%. Prime lending goes down to 11.5%, and banks start sending notice to their customers and say, look, your mortgage is cheaper now.
More developed, those are where you see that in developed economies. Same thing, if you go to the UK, if you have a mortgage in the UK, once the Bank of England reduce rates, you see letters going out.
It flows into the banking system.
Yeah, it flows into the banking system and flows into the credit system. But here we don't have a proper, effective credit system.
Is anybody really listening to you and I right now? I'm not sure.
Well, the only part I can say is that...
Because folks just say, hold on, boss, what exactly did the central bank do today? How does that impact me?
So, the only thing I would say in their defense is that they have more data than we see. So there are things that maybe they see that we don't see. They would have, a lot of economists sitting down and doing all sorts of forecasts and telling them where things are going to be and what they need to do. So I want to believe they have a lot more data available than to the man on the streets. But once again, I think it's still a tough one to take in right now. I think that hit everybody in the belly. Nobody I know expected.
We didn't see it coming.
Nobody saw that coming.
Not 50.
Yeah, not 50 and not a 500 basis point TRR.
CRR.
Not
It's a double one. It's just double barrel.
Yeah, it is.
The Western style.
It is.
The cowboy style.
It definitely is. And I mean, we already saw yield start to move up a bit already today,
Yes.
post the MPC announcement. Yeah, I saw bond yields inch up a little bit.
Yeah, I saw that.
The T-bill lockdown tomorrow.
The
might see the same thing happen again. I mean, it's telling because for the government is also trying to borrow. And you're making the cost of borrowing more expensive for them. I guess in a way that's supposed to help reduce government spending. But the truth about it is that government will just borrow and continue spending. And that additional money, interest that's going to be paid out might also in a way count for inflationary pressure. Because you're going to have them, rather than paying out 15%, they're going to pay out 21, 22%. That money goes into people's hands to spend once again. So people are going to spend that maybe chasing the dollar, or people are going to spend that buying goods, and, so that would also affect inflation in the long run.
How should investors price in today's 50 basis points, CRR up to 50%, in terms of in near to medium term? How should they price it in?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the different markets, if you look at fixed income, for instance, we expect, or like I said, yields have already started going up, makes it more attractive for some investors. Equities market is going to be a bit of a tough one. Typically, when rates go up, equities market should struggle a little bit. There's an inverse relationship. But at the same time, if you're in there, you can look out for those people or those companies that will benefit from rate hikes, like the banks, for instance. But FMCGs and co would most probably struggle a little bit.
Exactly. I see that today. It's already reflecting. The banks went up 3%.
Yeah. So, and then real estate, you're going to see people, for instance, real estate developers and co, they're going to have to borrow more. That means property prices will most likely have to go up again. And, once again, feeds back a little bit into inflation. So I think looking at those three things, people would most probably want to try and focus once again on maybe things that have some exposure to foreign currency as a way of sort of hedging against the continued depreciation of the currency that we have seen, right? But I think from those two broad markets, and then in terms of manufacturing sector, if you're a manufacturer, I think you're going to have a lot more pain coming your way.
A couple of survey data released by the central bank penultimate today's MPC was to the effect that the manufacturers are not so enthused, as it were, in the business confidence survey as to where things are going. If you look at the forward FX market, Naira has been priced now at the FMDQ around 2,000, a few notches above 2,000 level for a one-year Naira contract. So that back into the manufacturing space tells how folks think things will go within the next 1 year or so. What's your thoughts around that, if that is beginning to happen? So the growth that we really want to engineer, is it coming anytime soon, beyond what we're seeing now around 2.8%, 3%?
Well, I mean, that growth is going to be tough. They talked about a $1 trillion economy. I don't see how we're going to achieve that with interest rates where they are, with the currency where it is, and the fact that
$300 billion right now. Thereabout.
And, the more the currency depreciates, the lower your GDP.
The value.
The value in your GDP.
Yes.
So, I mean, to achieve that figure that we were looking at initially, the 1 trillion, for instance, you would have to see some massive appreciation of the currency. And then you need to see the economy grow maybe at about 10%. Yeah, in real terms. Yeah, you're going to have to see a massive growth in the economy over the next few years. But, I mean, 3.14, thereabouts, what last figure that came out, definitely not encouraging. We definitely don't see where that takes us, right? So I think those are all the things, and that's why there's a lot of focus on the fiscal side and what would the fiscal people do to help. Are they going to be able to increase crude oil production? The central bank governor talked about 2 million barrels a day.
Yes.
If we're able to get that, that would be fantastic.
But here was Cardoso reading that and speaking the Q&A, talking about the monolithic economy that we run, he said we should, they said until the fundamentals are fixed, Nigeria is going to continue to suboptimize. And he says we should diversify into the real areas. So it's sounding more urgent. So that, I'm not sure he's talking just about crude oil production.
Yeah, I mean, the heartbeat of your economy ideally should be production, manufacturing to export. That is what. So either you're doing that or you're a services economy.
Strongly so.
Strongly. So, I mean, there are countries that we know in the world that are, if you look at the Swiss, mainly just services. That's what they do. Or some do tourism, still a minimum, it's sort of a service, right? Or you're into manufacturing, but not just, because what we tend to see in a lot of African countries is that they have the mineral resources, but what they do is they just mine them, extract them, and export. They don't add value to them. We need to start to see a lot more value addition, which is why something like a Dangote refinery is great, because export the crude, refine it, extract the crude, refine it, and export, it comes in. Get cocoa, don't just get the cocoa and sell it raw. No, convert the cocoa into hot chocolate, into chocolates or whatever it is, right? Or beverages, and export it. There's a lot more value when you do the value add. So if, for instance, the agricultural entity gets 10 or 15% returns from growing cocoa, when you add value, maybe there's another like 30 or 40% that you're going to make on that. That is where the real value is. So yes, we need to diversify the economy, and one way to do that is to try and increase production. But the challenge will be that with high interest rates, production would struggle. So it's a bit of a, double-edged sword. Which way do you go?
I'm still wondering, Nnamdi, as to how we have so much Naira in circulation and we can't transmit this Naira, which we print off the press, as it were, for our own machines, into productive activities.
It's a good question. I guess due to the fact that we still import a lot of things, so that Naira ends up chasing dollars to bring in things rather than actually manufacturing in Nigeria. It's difficult to be a manufacturer. Look at Dangote. We've known Dangote has been in
the trenches
for years, right?
For
and you can see him struggling with his refinery and trying to get all sorts of concessions to get the refinery
up and running.
Yeah, up and running, right? So it's not really easy. For most people, it's a lot easier to just import your goods and sell than to go through the rigmarole of power issues, bad roads.
Land ownership.
Yeah, land ownership. How do you transfer your goods from wherever you're producing it to where they're going to buy it? Is it by road? If it's perishables, it's going to spoil before it gets there. They're going to lose about 30 or 40% of it. So most people rather just import goods and just sell to people rather than go through the rigors of actually producing. So we need to encourage people to produce, and so that we have enough to export.
But do you think these are some of the fundamentals that Cardoso was speaking to, that we need to fix the fundamentals?
Definitely, yeah. And that comes to the fiscal side, because that's more of a fiscal thing rather than a monetary policy tool. That's the fiscal side. Providing people with the infrastructure to manufacture, enabling an environment for them to produce so that they can export. All of that is largely on the fiscal side.
So I got a 50 basis points, CRR up to 50%. What would that mean for ordinary demand on the street as we go into the final quarter of the year? We just have about 90 days, technically speaking.
Yeah. Well, for the man on the street who invests, he can go and do government securities, treasury bills, definitely going to get better rates.
Here we go.
Yeah. For the man on the street who uses a payday loan type of, to fund, costs are going to go up. For the man on the streets, you're going to see most probably higher costs of goods because manufacturing companies are going to have to borrow at higher rates, and that's going to transmit into, they have to pass on some of that. They might not be able to pass it on fully, but they're going to pass it on. I think we're still going to see inflationary pressures continue from now until the end of the year. I don't think it's going to just dissipate with this rate hike. It's most probably going to continue until the end of the year. Currency is most probably going to be under pressure from now to the end of the year.
Inflation will still stick around 30?
I think so. From now to the end of the year. I don't see anything, unless you can really bring down the currency, I don't see anything that's going to massively, shock inflation and let it start to, fall aggressively.
How do you think the central bank should decide on interest rates at the final meeting in November?
What I thought last time. I thought.
No, I got it. I just want to throw you under the bus.
Well, we can only say to them,
all the best.
It's enough. They should. I would expect
that
they hold to see how things play out. Once again, like I said, they have more data available, but I would expect that they hold. Are they not going? Are they going to take?
At least a 25.
Are they going to take share out to 55 or 60%? That's going to be crazy. 50% is crazy enough. Are you going to move it to 60? So I know they talked about real return on rates. So
yes.
Question is, would they push rates up until 35 so that they'll get hopefully real returns on your investments, right? But once again, the tough one is not that simple.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just not that simple.
It's a tough one.
I'm
not going to stick my neck out for November. I'm going to let...
It's our job to stick our neck out. We have to
let
figure it
Cardoso
out.
do his job, and I'm going to do my job on this side. When he does the briefing in November, I'm going to listen to him and his team. For now, I'm not going to go there. You folks can just go ahead because I was sticking my neck out. I saw yields coming down at the PMI private markets auction for the last 2-3 weeks, and I said, hey, Bolsin, there's going to be likely a rate cut.
No, I didn't think a rate cut. I thought they were going to hold.
I was so optimistic.
No,
I need to stay on my lane. Have a great evening. Thank you, Nnamdi Nwizu. We appreciate your insight as always. Thank you.
Great to be having you.
Thank you so much from Commercial Partners.